So now you want to start your sampling journey, but before you proceed, there's something you need to be aware of because it's a great threat to good research, and that is sampling bias. When I talk about sampling bias, what I'm referring to is situations where the individuals you include in your sample are not true representation of your population. And this is significant because it leads to skewed results, misrepresentation of results, or just invalid results in general. And whether you are carrying out an experiment, you are just conducting a survey, or you are doing simple data analysis, immediately your sample is biased, your whole study, your whole work is compromised. And that is not right, especially if you want to be have high integrity in our research work. And bias is just prop into our research work in various ways, some obvious ways, some are even more subtle, and we'll be looking at different ways this can couple. The first way that you should be conversant with is selection bias. Selection bias is a bias that is a result of systemic structures that make individuals to be more represented in a sample than they ought to be. An example is you want to do a research on digital assets in Lagos State, Nigeria, and you put your questionnaire online. So only people that are online have access to your questionnaire. What happens in that situation is that your result is automatically skewed to people that have digital access services. And that means you will not get input from people that do not have access to the internet. So your result is already skewed from what the system you put in place in your selection process. Another bias we encounter is non-response bias. Because sometimes researchers are very limited to how much response they get from their sample. You've established your sample size, you sent about 1,000 questionnaires out and you got about 600 back. So if the 400 you didn't get response for have a distinct characteristics or opinion from those you have, it can also skew your result. And sometimes their silence speaks volume, and you need to account for it because it can provide critical insights in your analysis. Another bias we encounter is voluntary response bias. This is a situation that occurs where only people that are very passionate about the topic of interest respond to your questionnaire, and often kind of lead to polarization of results and screw the entire result. An example is when they do political polls. If you recall in the last election, the polls showed that a specific candidate was going to win because the poll was only online and limited to people that have access to the internet, which is just a small portion of the national population. And that's why sometimes political polls are always so insufficient because they are quite polarizing, and those people that will volunteer to take those polls are often very passionate about their specific candidates. So another way we can encounter bias is when we are doing convenience sampling, and because of the lack of randomness, we can fall into the trap of creating a bias. You are a high income earner and you want to do a research on the average income of Nigerians. Obviously, you now go to only places you have access to and give out your questionnaire in that place. Obviously, the response you will get will be from high income earners, and it's not totally representative of even your neighborhood or your local community at large. So in those kind of, when you do things out of convenience, you will tend to encounter bias. Another bias that we can encounter is also called recall bias, because some research work rely on the memory of the individuals included in their sample. What they remember, obviously, we know that human memory is quite limited, might be wrong, and that will already compromise our research work. So you need to be wary of recall bias also. So we also have another type of bias we call survivorship bias, where only the people that survived or people that the success stories are the only people included in the sample. Example, you are looking at business environment for startups in Nigeria 5 years and above. What will happen is that you only be able to interview startups that have survived, right? Only those are 5 years and above. The ones that died along the road, you might not have access to them again to interview them. So those kind of bias, it doesn't give you the full representation of their entrepreneurship journey. So why does this matter? It matters because sampling bias affects credibility, it affects generalizability, and it affects the fairness of the information we give to the public. In policy, it can lead to poor decision making, and this is going to end up affecting a lot of lives. And also in medicine, you can just and it can lead to giving poor treatment regimens for patients, which is unfair. Also, let's say in business, you can just lose a lot of money because of bias that you created in sampling, producing products that nobody wants. So how can we avoid bias in sampling? We can avoid it by, as much as possible, clearly defining our population, our target population, using simple random sampling as much as possible, and stratify our data, especially when there are a lot of niche groups within the population that we want to be represented in our results, and that will give it more integrity. Another thing we need to do is to test and report bias, because really researchers don't aim for perfection, but at least for honesty, credibility, and integrity. So if you like this video, do well to like, subscribe, follow the page wherever you are seeing it on any platform, and obviously the lecture notes will be immediately after this video, so check it out. And maybe during the week we'll also put out some questions for you to answer in relation to sampling bias.